I'm telling you to use. So I've written that in the instructions, or half a tablespoon of table salt, or the Morton's, the blue box kosher salt, because those salt granules are much smaller. So you get a lot more salty flavor out of the same amount. Does everybody get that? That's kind of important. Whenever you're cooking, if you're looking at a recipe and it says salt, generally it means table salt. Because I only have Diamond Crystal Kosher, generally double the salt in any recipe that says a teaspoon of salt without specifying kosher salt. So just a little aside. So we have the salt, we have the yeast, the flour in here, and I'm gonna make this loaf a cinnamon, raisin, pecan loaf, which is such a good loaf to have for toast. And I just wanted to show you what I mean by adding the added. So I have some raisins, and I'm going to put about a half a cup or so of raisins in there, in the dry ingredients. I haven't added the water yet. And then about a teaspoon or so, this is a half teaspoon measure, so I'll do 2 of those in there, of cinnamon. And then I have pecans, which I like to give a little chop, just so that there aren't too big pieces. And again, about a half cup. So the total amount of add-ins is about a cup. But you can adjust that. If you want more, go ahead. If you want not quite so much, very, again, very adaptable. So we have our pecans and raisins and the cinnamon. And at this stage, you want to give this a good stir. So I haven't added the water yet. You want to get all that salt, the yeast, the flavors, the 2 flours all mixed up. And that looks good. And then we're going to take our water, and I have a full cup and a half here, which I may or may not use all of. So I'm going to add about a cup of that and give it a stir. And as I said in the recipe, you're really just looking to moisten all the flour. So you don't want it to be a really smooth, wet dough right from the get-go. So that needs quite a bit more water. So I'll pour in most of the rest. And the funny thing about flour is, and the reason why, again, it's important to sort of do this by eye, by seeing that the flour is all moistened and no longer dry in the bowl, is flour actually absorbs moisture in your kitchen. So especially in the summertime, you know, of course, if you have it in a closed container, it's likely to be stable, but it can absorb moisture, especially when it's humid and all in the summer. So you may not need as much water when you do this. So you know, if you just had an amount and dumped it in, it might be too much because your flour might have already been a little on the moist side. So conversely, in the wintertime, sometimes your flour is drier, so you may need more water. So again, I'm just stirring this up. It's still pretty dry and it hasn't come together yet. So not only do we want all the flour moistened, we want it to hold together, but not, again, not into a wet dough. So there's a nice big pocket of dry right here. So I'm just going to pour that water right on that. And I'm getting close. And as I do this, I'm scraping the bowl with a rubber spatula because some of the recipes, in fact, Jim Leahy's original recipe has you take the dough out of the bowl and oil the bowl. And I think that's kind of a nuisance. I mean, why, if you don't really have to? So I'm just stirring it up. Everything now is drawn together. There's no dry flour in the bottom of the bowl. I'm just going to scrape this off a little bit. And it doesn't really look, you know, quite wet enough or quite as wet as a lot of other doughs. It's not that smooth, cohesive dough that you may be used to if you do make bread. But this is great because what's going to happen is this dough is going to sit for up to 24 hours, and the moisture is going to be absorbed into the flour, and it's going to turn into something I'll show you in a second. And it's going to look perfect. But before we leave it, we want to cover it with a little skim of olive oil. And even with this sort of sweet-ish recipe, I do use olive oil and I don't notice a taste. So just drizzle a little olive oil over the dough and then carefully turn it over just to coat the entire ball of dough in that little bit of olive oil. I'd probably put maybe 2 tablespoons over the top of the dough. And this is going to be covered, and I'll just take a pot cover and I'm going to place it on the counter, and tomorrow for dinner I can bake this and have a wonderful loaf of bread. So we have that one for tomorrow, and I'll show you what is going to happen. This I made yesterday at about this time. So this dough is now all smooth. It's fully, sort of, it's all together. It has a really nice consistency. It's pretty wet. And I'm going to show you the step where we want to basically fold the dough into itself. It helps to distribute the yeast. It also helps to form basically a skin on the outside of the dough when it bakes. So it increases that sort of elasticity on the outside. So when I say in the recipe, after several hours, the dough will have risen, become more cohesive, using a rubber spatula or 2 forks, and I'll show you both ways. You want to take sort of the 4 corners or the 4 quadrants and just fold it into itself. Can you guys see that? Is that all right? And then I'm going to go to this side, and I could just as easily be taking 2 forks and lifting it over. Some people find that easier to manage. So there's a third, and now 1 more. And if you do 5, no big deal. And then basically you want to sort of flip it over onto itself, and then you have this sort of tighter dough, and you're going to let that sit for another couple of hours. So that is our mid-range step. We'll put that one aside. And this is what it looks like. I did that process a couple of hours ago. And so here is a dough that, again, I first mixed up last night. Then a couple of hours ago, I did that flipping business and turned it over. And now it's ready to go in the oven. So this version is Kalamata olives and walnuts and rosemary. So again, just to show you some options, some things that we like. That middle version, the one I just flipped over, is just plain white. It might have a little bit of, I think I put a little bit of whole wheat in it, but it's otherwise just plain white. So this one we're going to get ready to bake. And again, before we started, I turned on my oven and I first put a lidded pot in the oven. So the cold pot, cold oven, turn the oven on to 500. So as high as your oven will go pretty much. And I'm going to take that out. And we're going to put this dough in this pot. So this is a pot that I really like to bake my bread in. It's sort of an oval shape. It makes a nice loaf, but I also make this bread in just a round pot. So whatever you have, the important thing is that it can stand the high heat, so up to 500 degrees. And think about the handle. Not all handles can stand that high heat. And then the other thing is it has to have a lid. So you want a pot with a lid. I'm going to put my hot pad on that lid. That might be the most important tip I give you today, because you don't want to touch that with your bare hands. So remember to cover the handle. And I'm going to take a little bit of cornmeal. And this is totally optional. I kind of like that little bit of crust that it makes on the bottom. You don't need to grease this pot. Oh, you can see how it's steaming from the heat of the pot and the cornmeal. but it just gives it a little bit of crunch on the bottom. So I really like that. And then we'll take this dough and I just sort of let it fall out of the pan or out of the bowl into the pot. And sometimes it's a little funky and it never matters. So this has a little, I don't know if you can see it, has a little bit of a crease in it, and I kind of like that. And then I also really, well, yeah, this one I do. I was gonna say I wouldn't do this with the raisin one, but with this savory, I do like a sprinkle of Maldon salt or sea salt, something crunchy on the top. So we'll put the lid back on and it goes back in the oven for about 25 minutes. So lid on for the first 25 minutes, and I'm going to set a timer. And it bakes, basically it's an oven inside of an oven. It keeps the moisture in, it develops this wonderful crust, and then after 25 minutes, we'll take the lid off, put it back in the oven, and that's when it gets really nice and brown and it finishes the baking. So this recipe really is the two pieces. First of all, it's all about time. It's super easy to stir up. There's no kneading. I mean, obviously the name of the bread is no knead. So it's just so simple to throw together, but you do need to cook it inside a pot and then with the lid off. So those are the two sort of highlights of this recipe. I do want to say it keeps for, I find if I wrap it in a towel, I generally don't put my bread in plastic if it's at room temperature, and I don't refrigerate my bread. So if we were going to eat it, you know, over the course of a couple of days, I'll wrap it in a towel and just put it on the counter. If it's been a couple of days and I think, all right, we're not going to finish this, I slice it up, or I possibly tear it up into crouton-sized chunks. And it's even better if you tear it than if you cut it, because then you have all the craggy pieces. Put those slices or the crouton pieces in a Ziploc bag and freeze them. And you have like money in the bank. It's so great, especially that raisin, pecan, cinnamon bread, to pull a slice of that out and toast it for your breakfast for weeks and weeks. It's really terrific. So a couple of days on the counter, after that in a Ziploc in the freezer, but be sure to slice it before you freeze it because it's such a pain if you don't. You have to wait for it to defrost and it's a nuisance. So any questions on the bread?
I muted everyone during your instructions. So anyone that wants to ask any, that's why we were so quiet. So if anyone has a question, just unmute yourself first, please.
Susan?
Yeah.
It's Pat. Depending on how many additions you put in.
Oh, you know, Pat, are you talking? I can hardly hear you. I think I hear your voice, but.
Yes, do you need to use more water depending on if you put a cup more of additional things into it?
I think the ingredients like raisins and olives and nuts, no, not really. It's really up to the amount of flour. The flour determines how much water you have to put in it, both the humidity level or the moisture level of the flour and the quantity. So it doesn't really change the water. And really, you know, I think, well, actually, if you pour too much water and add a little more flour, it's not a big deal. You can't wreck this recipe, basically. It's very forgiving, but you want to sort of go slowly, adding that last half cup of water, because you might not need all of the cup and a half, or you might need more like a cup and 3/4 if your flour was particularly dry. But I don't think it matters whether you add the things like raisins or nuts or cheese.
Do you think using your Dutch oven changes the way it will cook?
Using a Dutch oven?
Like the pot that you had,
Like
usually people
pot
pot that. Yeah.
That's what I always use, but I've heard of people who make this dough in a this bread in a glass covered what are those? You know, the
Pyrex?
Casserole.
Yeah, casserole. So as long as, maybe you wouldn't put your oven quite so hot, you know, I wouldn't want you to break your ceramic casserole. But that's why I like the, you know, the metal. It's basically indestructible. It gives it that nice hot sear almost when it goes in. But as long as you can cover it, and I suppose you could even cover it with foil, except you're working on a hot container. So putting foil on that would be a little dangerous. So I like a lid.
Susan, does the water have to be warm? I take it should be warm, right? When you put it.
You know what? It really doesn't matter because it's going to be sitting at room temperature for hours. So the temperature doesn't really matter when you mix it in. It can be right out of the tap. I don't think I put ice water in, nor boiling, certainly. It's working with, you know, you don't want to be too hot, but it's comfortable temperature water is really all you need.
Okay.
And actually, that reminds me, you can make this. I've made this dough in the morning and eaten it that night. So you can rush it, but it's better if you do it today for tomorrow, generally speaking.
So it rises more.
Yeah, giving it that time really helps develop the flavor. And one more thing, I have, of course, life interrupts your plans, mix this up and then realize, oh shoot, I can't bake that. Stick the whole thing, if you can, in the refrigerator. So just put your bowl covered in the fridge overnight, let it come back up to temperature, and you know, depending on how long it rose before you refrigerated it, just get right back into it. And I have also, it's not quite as good, but you don't want to throw anything away. If for some reason you say, I can't even refrigerate this and cook it in the next 2 days, throw it in the freezer. Throw the dough in an oiled Ziploc bag so you can get it out easily. Zip it up and then just dump it back in your bowl, put it back on the counter for another, whatever, you know, 4 or 5 hours to really come up to room temperature, and then be on your way.
Susan, does the temperature of your house make this vary? Some people keep their houses a lot cooler. Some people keep them much warmer.
Yeah, if your house is particularly warm, it will rise a little faster, but you're using a relatively small amount of yeast, so it's not going to just go crazy. It doesn't, you know, you're not going to damage it or have it spilling out of the bowl, let's say, if you have a warm house. I do recommend putting it in a pretty large bowl, just because you don't want to have it come out. But it's, again, you know, everything sort of evens out, whether your house is cooler or warmer, whether the water was cooler or warmer, because it sits for so long. It gives it time to both absorb the moisture, the water, and for the yeast to do its thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's Pat again, and I just want to comment on the use of the Pyrex. I had an unfortunate circumstance of having a very high heat. It wasn't for bread, it was something else I was making with Pyrex. When I took the Pyrex out and put it on the counter,
Shattered.
it shattered.
Yeah.
I'm so against using Pyrex at a very high heat. And someone told me that it often depends on the quality of the Pyrex. Well, to me, Pyrex is Pyrex. So I don't think I would do that. And the one other thing about the storage of the bread, I started making a lot of it and putting it in the plastic bag in the refrigerator. And I found that the flavor on day 2 was great. Flavor on day 6 was fabulous. That the time that it sat gave it a even better quality of yeastiness or what have you. So that's just a point that I found it did keep a long time without freezing it. And then being able to make maybe 2 loaves, one on Monday and then another one on Thursday.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, it's like money in the bank. I mean, having homemade bread, you know, makes everybody happy. Anybody else have any? Of course, speak up with any questions anytime. Interrupt, you know, if you're allowed to, if you're not muted. But
I was just muting it so that like we could hear, because I'm also recording it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, Speak up if you have any more questions about bread, but we're gonna leave it there for whatever, about 25 more minutes or 20 more minutes. And I'm gonna get on to making this soup. If any of you subscribe to the cooking site on the New York Times website, you might have seen this recipe, and I've made a few little changes because I loved it the way it was written, but you know, I couldn't find lemongrass. Surprise, surprise. Although if you go off island, I believe, well, some Stop and Shop do carry lemongrass in a tube, which is so handy. It's in the produce section. It's in a tube, like a fat toothpaste tube, and you can freeze it and then just defrost it enough to squeeze out the amount you need. So if you like that lemongrass flavor, you can add it to this recipe, about a tablespoon or so. Or of course you can get fresh lemongrass, but that, you know, tends to be harder to find, and you can keep this tube of lemongrass in your freezer and have it forever, basically. So what we're going to do today does not have lemongrass in it because I couldn't find it, but it does have green curry, which is a Thai curry paste. If you can only find, or you only have red curry paste, you can also use that. Totally fine. The important thing though is that you check the spiciness level of your curry paste, because this one is one that I bought at an Asian market in Connecticut, and it is really spicy. I mean, it almost made the soup too spicy for me to eat when I put the full amount in. This Thai Kitchen green curry paste, which I think they have at the Big, if not at the Depot, much more mild. It's really, really tasty, and it doesn't give you nearly the amount of heat. So check, you know, just dip your spoon, the edge, and just taste your curry paste to see if it's really spicy. And if it is, I recommend going with a tablespoon at the most, really, for this recipe. If it's very mild and you really love the flavor, you can go up to 3 tablespoons. So that is a very important point. So we're going to start this by talking about the squash. And again, before we started, I took a butternut squash, cut it in half, and laid it on parchment paper so I don't have to do a lot of cleanup, and roasted it at about 400 degrees for about an hour, and it's totally soft. So it's really nice. And now, of course, it's cooled down so I can touch it. And I'm going to put that aside for a moment, and we'll get going with our onions. So I'm going to start our pot here, and I'm going to take some coconut oil. And like I say in the recipe, you can use coconut oil, or you can use olive oil or any vegetable oil you like. And I'm going to put 2 tablespoons in the pot. And I just like the flavor that this adds. So you don't have to, but it does add a little bit. And to that, we are going to add a chopped onion. So about, you know, a medium onion, not a giant one, about a cup worth of chopped onion. So we will just, and the way you chop your onion really doesn't matter. It can be small, it can be large, because we're going to puree the soup when we're done. So it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be uniform. And so put in with the onions, get these guys in. At this stage, we're also going to put a piece of ginger in. And about a 2-inch is what I'm gonna go with, because I like ginger a lot. And I don't know if you all know this, but to peel ginger, I think the easiest way is to use a fork, or sorry, a spoon. So I've just turned it in my hand, almost like a paring knife. And you can just slide that spoon along the skin. And if you were to do this with a paring knife, it would take off a lot more of the flesh. So you cut into the ginger that you want to use a lot more. So this is the curve of the spoon also helps get you around the curve of the ginger, as it has all those little knobs and little pieces. And if you don't get all the skin off, it is not a big deal. So we're going to call that even. And then I'm going to slice this. Whew, the tough ginger. And again, you don't need to make it perfect, but you want small pieces. And then we'll just give this a chop. And when you're chopping, I'm sure you all know this very well, but I have to remind, tuck your fingers underneath and don't let your thumb stick out. So you make a little wall with your fingers and the blade of the knife will only hit that. It'll never hit your fingers because you've got them curled under. So don't forget that. So we have our chopped ginger in the pot with the onions. And we'll just give that a little stir. I'm going to turn this down to about medium, and we'll let it go here, medium low, because we don't want to brown the onions. We just want to get them nice and soft, and of course cook the ginger a little bit, give it a chance to give us its flavor, and then let's add some salt to that. About a teaspoon, excuse me. This is a half. About a teaspoon of salt, and that helps to sweat the onions. It helps to get them going. So it's nice to add salt when you're sauteing the onions. So we'll let that go for a moment.
No, it's okay.
And I'm also just going to get ready, but I'm not going to put the garlic in quite yet. I have a clove of garlic, and I'm going to wait to put it in there because I don't want the garlic to burn. So we'll just slice it, and I'm going to get out the little seedling here and the end. And then again, we can just give this a rough chop. Fingers tucked under. And we'll hang on to that, ready to go in once the onions are cooked down a little bit more. So we'll just move that to the side. So we're going to So we're going to let this cook for a few more minutes. And while it does, I'm going to move on to this garnish. And this, I think, is amazing. This stuff is so good. So it is totally optional, but I think it would be great on a lot of different soups, or even thrown on top of some salad or something like that. And it's a mixture of nuts, whatever kind of nuts you like. The original recipe calls for peanuts, but I've also made it with cashews. It was amazing. I think it would be very good with almonds. Unsweetened coconut flakes, and those you really, I'm going to move this, my next tray of ingredients over. So we'll be working with peanuts today and coconut flakes. And these guys are a little bigger than, say, what you'd get with angel flake coconut, where it's more sort of thin strips. These are really kind of big, wide flakes, which I think is really good. I haven't made this recipe with angel flake, the sweetened more easily found, perhaps, coconut. However, there's sugar in this recipe, so if you really wanted to try it, I would be game to, if you only had the sweetened coconut, just drop the sugar out of the recipe and go ahead. Make it with the sweet coconut. So if you wanted to, I think that would work out just fine. So we're going to start the garnish, and for that, we're going to begin again with some coconut oil. And we want this coconut oil to be melted. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to throw it in the microwave. Be right back. And to that melted coconut oil, we're going to add some fish sauce. Fish sauce is kind of a controversial ingredient. Not everyone loves it. However, I think it adds a real sense of that umami in a good way, a little funky taste, which again, doesn't have to be everyone's taste, but it's a really, really nice addition to both the soup and to the garnish. So if you don't think you like it, cut it in half or cut it in third or skip it all together. But I do think it adds a really interesting, really tasty element to both of these recipes. So our coconut oil should be, oh, well, it's taking a little while, but it's warmer. So I'm just going to mash that up. You just want to be able to stir things together. So you don't want it solid, like shortening. So to the tablespoon of melted coconut oil, I'm going to add the full tablespoon of fish sauce because I really like it. And then we're going to add a pinch of red pepper flakes, again, to your taste. If you really don't care for spicy food, you can leave it out. If you like a lot of spice, add a big pinch. And then the next recipe, or sorry, the next ingredient is brown sugar. And here we want a whole teaspoon of brown sugar. And we'll stir this all up before we add the nuts and the coconut. The original recipe, I do have grated rind of 1 lime added to this mixture. I think it's better if you wait. I added it after I cooked this garnish, and I like it better. The lime stays brighter. It doesn't need to be cooked. So I'm going to add the lime zest to what I've already cooked and not add it at this stage. So you might want to make that change on your recipe. So to this mixture, which I've now stirred up, I'm going to put in 1/2 cup of coconut flakes and then 1/2 cup of peanuts. And these happen to be unsalted, dry roasted. If they're salted, I think it'll be okay. The mixture obviously will have a little more salt in it. There's salt in the fish sauce. So if you do leave the fish sauce out, you'll want to add some salt to this recipe. And then to this, with this, we will just spread it on a cookie sheet and bake it at 300 degrees. I do again put the mixture on a piece of parchment paper. This is what I made earlier. So it's already been baked. And you can see, I hope, how it gets browned. And every 5 minutes, I just give it a little stir and put it back in for a total of 15 minutes. Sometimes it takes up to 20, depending on your oven. But it's nice and crisp and it's golden brown. And now I'm going to add the lime zest. So you can do this to taste, but about a 1/2 teaspoon or so of lime zest, I think is nice. So we'll just get a little more of that. And then we'll just put this in a nice serving bowl and be ready to put that on our soup. So we'll go back to the soup and we will have in our pot now I've turned this off because it was going a little long. We have the onion and the garlic, or sorry, the onion and the ginger. And now we'll add the garlic to this. So we'll put it back on the flame for a little bit. Let the garlic get nice and fragrant. That back on about a medium setting. And we're also going to add, once the garlic has a chance to get a little more fragrant, we're going to add the squash and the coconut milk. This I bought at Trader Joe's. You know, any coconut milk, make sure you buy coconut milk and not coconut cream, which is what you would put in I think a pina colada or something like that. It's much, much denser. You want coconut milk. And also I recommend buy the regular coconut milk. If you buy the light version, you're basically buying half a can of regular and half a can of water. So if you want light, just dilute it and you've got the light. So my timer just went off, and that means that our bread is ready to take the lid off. So let's open the oven and take the lid off. And I'll show you. So that has grown quite a bit. It went in and it's risen and it's gotten nice and big, but it's not brown yet. So I'm going to put it back in the oven with the lid off for another 20 to 25 minutes. Trusty timer. And yeah, we'll see that in a few minutes. So let's see how this is doing. I can really smell the garlic now, so we can start adding the other ingredients to the soup pot. So the first thing is this coconut milk, and there's a nice cap of, I don't know, probably coconut fat, but it's the yummy part on top. So be careful when you pour it out. We'll add coconut milk. And we'll also add, why don't we do this in order? A tablespoon, here we are, of, I'm gonna go with this spicy green curry paste. So I'm gonna add only 1 tablespoon. And it's yeah, you can, if you just tap your finger in this and give it a taste, you'll know the potency of your curry paste. And then we'll add a tablespoon of fish sauce. And of course, we need all of our squash. So I'm gonna get a big spoon out. And with this, I just do it right into the pot. So I just scoop it out. And since it's cooled, I can handle it. Just try not to get any of the skin. You don't want that. And this saves you, by roasting it, you know, nearly whole, just halved, you don't have to peel it. You know, peeling a butternut squash, I think, is even a little dangerous. So we'll scoop all the squash out. It's actually coming out with my hand, sort of peeling away on its own. And we'll let that all come up to temperature and give it a nice stir. And don't worry about it all coming together quite yet, because we're going to use the blender, or I'm going to use an immersion blender to get this all cohesive. So we'll bring it up to a simmer. And then we'll get going with the blender. Does anyone have any questions while I wait for that to come up? Are you all still silent? I can't hear anybody.
Anyone can unmute themselves, I think.
The Thai paste, I have a question about that.
Yes,
Since you only use a small amount of it, do you have to keep that refrigerated or?
I do keep it in the fridge and it keeps a really long time.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it does not go bad. But both kinds, I just keep in the refrigerator. I've never had it go bad. So
Okay,
I'm sure
thank
it
you.
would, years on, or if you left it out, but it's
Yeah.
really durable condiment. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can definitely keep it a while.
No, I've never used fish sauce before. How long does that keep in the refrigerator?
That's another thing that I think it's almost like honey, it never goes bad.
Oh, good.
Really?
Yeah, I do keep it in the fridge, although I'm not sure you have to. Oh, it does say refrigerate for quality, but I need my glasses to read this. There is a best before date. Yeah, so this is I've had this bottle for a little while, 6 months, and it says it's best before February of 2023. So
Oh,
it lasts quite a while.
wow.
And actually, this brand is a very good one. If you see it, this Red Boat.
Okay.
If you look at any of the sort of cooking websites where they sort of rank their favorite ingredients, this often comes out on top. It's a very good quality fish sauce, and it's basically it's anchovies.
Oh.
So that's why it's got that salty umami funk, which again is not everybody's taste, but a little bit can make a big difference, and you won't taste it. So if you're trying this out and you don't know if you like fish sauce, for this recipe, I might put in like a teaspoon
Okay.
to start out.
Okay.
I really like it, and I don't notice it, but I know I like it, so I add the full tablespoon. But actually, my family, one or two of them are kind of like on fish sauce, but they really like the soup. So,
Would you give the name of that fish sauce again?
Red Boat.
it's called
Red Boat.
Red Boat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Any better?
Thank you.
I should put it under the light, maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good brand. So our soup has come up to temperature. Oh, and I forgot the water. I was going to say it looks a little thick. So the water content. Hang on one second. To go over to my sink. It says add between a cup to 2 cups of water. So you can definitely add more after you've pureed it. So I'm gonna add about a cup. And if you really want to, you can add chicken stock here. That's totally fine. I'm a pretty big fan of using water in my soup. Part of it is because I have a lot of vegetarians in my family, so adding chicken stock doesn't work for them. And also, I have not found a great vegetable stock. If anyone has a good idea, let me know. And I don't make my own vegetable stock. I know I could, maybe should, but water, if you have enough flavor in the soup, water does a great job. So, so feel free to add chicken stock if you like, but it tastes great with water. So I am going to get my handy immersion blender, which is on a cord.
I don't know.
I love this thing. If anyone has one of these, they're fabulous. To not have to transfer the soup into a blender and do all that is really nice. So I'm going to move this over so you guys can see what I'm doing. So here's the soup, kind of not afraid it's going to spill. Can you see?
Yep. Yep. Good.
And the main thing when you use an immersion blender is don't stand over it and do it if it's hot. I have done that before, and it splashed, and I had a really nice burn of squash soup on the side of my nose. So don't do that. Stand back, get your spoon out of the way, and just spray it up. And if it's a little shallow, you can tip, sorry, if it's a little shallow, you can tip the pot. There's a one piece that doesn't want to cooperate. There you go. And that is about it. So I'll move that aside. And to serve this with a sprinkle of your garnish on top, maybe a salad and a nice slice of bread, I call that dinner.
You bet.
Yeah.
I'll be right over. I'm just kidding.
I know. I wish I could just say, come over. It's really
And I
nice.
wanted to suggest, I have a really good vegan broth. I'm not a
Oh,
vegan,
great.
but I like this. It's Orrington Farms. It's
Let me get my pen.
vegan and there's no animal or byproducts, and it's organic. So that for
What's the
me,
name of it again? I can't see it.
Orrington, ORRINGTON.
Great.
And it's a little more expensive, but it's worth it.
Is it the kind where you add to water?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so
I
it's
like
granular.
that.
Yeah.
When I do use chicken broth, I use the Better Than Bouillon.
Yeah,
Anyone else
yeah.
use that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I would
it's
never
good.
make just a straight chicken soup with it.
Yeah, this one is actually vegetable, and it's only 2 teaspoons to 1 cup. But I mean, I usually just eyeball it and taste it, and
Yeah.
and I
And
usually
it
do
lasts
other
forever.
things.
You
Yeah.
have it in your fridge, you just pull it out, and you don't have this big container to store, it doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. That's a good one to keep in mind. Where'd you buy it? Where'd you find it? Do you remember?
On the internet.
Of course.
I found it one day during quarantine.
Yeah. Oh, I have to say, on the subject of on the internet foods, if anyone hasn't discovered Misfits Market,
Oh,
that is a great way to get, especially frankly when the depot closes, a great way to get fresh vegetables and fruit. It comes, by lambs. It's really reasonable. I think I've gotten a $22 box that's like the size of this cutting board, full of fruits and vegetables. They call it Misfits Market because they take sometimes ugly or sort of, for whatever reason, not even appearance or certainly not
non-normative.
too much of a certain kind. And it would have gone bad, some of it, it would have been wasted, and it's all perfectly good, excellent quality. And if anyone's interested, I can send you a link, and you can even get a little off your first order because you get a reference.
Yeah, I've been doing it also for the last year, and they also now they have a lot of pantry options.
Yes,
really good stuff, and like you can get organic strawberries and like while they last. Yeah.
I suspended my subscription for the summer because I wanted to give Cindy the business, and I had a garden and stuff, but it's fantastic. And it's sort of like Christmas too. You open this up and it's no packaging. It's fabulous. So really, it's very, very good. And one time I had ordered some strawberries, and they arrived and they were awful. They were bruised and rotten, and I emailed them, and they gave me a full refund, full of apologies, and there was once in many orders. but they're very good at customer service. So just a little bit of sharing. If anyone has any other tips?
You might
I
get a
find
sponsor out of this.
I find sometimes that stuff I order on the internet, it comes in, it's like really close to the expiration date.
Oh,
Where if I'm going into Whole Foods or Traders or something, you can look at the expiration date. Do you find that?
I haven't really.
No.
Yeah, I know when I go to Ocean State Job Lot, I check the expiration dates,
Yeah.
but I haven't had that problem with the internet. Yeah. I do wish you were all right here. This is so nice to see your
We do
face.
too.
I know. I wish we could smell it.
Well,
Yeah.
when we can be back in each other's homes, this used to be a semi-career of mine. I had a little business with a friend where we did regular cooking classes. So
Oh, that's awesome.
maybe we can do a little bit of that at some point. It'd be more fun to share the food after we make it.
Certainly would, but in the meantime, Sue, I hope you're willing to do this again for us.
I'd love to. I'd love to. And if anyone has any requests of types of food, I mean, to any of us who I know Pat probably would do this again. And I'm looking forward to Sandra's stint in this position. Give us
I
ideas
know
of things.
the
that you
island has a lot of
make.
great cooks.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so many, and it's just fun to cook together and to talk about food and
That's
Yeah.
was the whole idea.
Hey, Susan.
Yeah.
well, it's so
Well,
fun to see you all.
It's
And
fun.
I have recorded it, so hopefully at some point we'll have it somewhere. But of course, we'll make sure that's okay again.
Oh yeah,
If you want to look at it first, or if we want to edit or whatever. But okay. Well, thank you so much, and everyone can unmute if you want to say hi. I was only doing it for the main instructive part. Sorry.
Yeah.
about
It was good to have all of you here. I love the response of the community. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Susan.
guys, thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank you very much.
I learned,
Thanks,
You're-
Susan. It's great.
thanks. It's
You're going to
wonderful.
be a tough follow.
Good evening, guys.
Good to see everybody.
Sandra,
Good to see everyone. Thank you
bye-bye.
all for coming.
I miss you
Bye.
all.
Oh,
Miss you too.
I
Janet.
miss you too.
Yeah, can't wait to get back. Can't wait for that vaccine.
We'll be here. Yeah.
In
okay.
the meantime, we'll have soup and bread.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Susan, I have a question for you for next week, so if you could stay on.
Oh,
What's that? Sandra, you talking to me?
No. Well, yeah, I do want to speak to you, but I'll call you on the phone, but I want to ask Susan about next week.
I think I don't know where she went. Is there a question, Sandra, about that time? Is the time okay still for you?
Oh, no, the time is fine. I'm just wondering, well, are you just standing in front of your iPad doing the presentation?
I have my laptop on a couple of stools that are piled up so that it's higher. Yeah, I can take a picture of my setup if you want to see it.
Yeah, that might be good, because I was trying to play today I was just trying to figure out how to set this up.
I know that Kristen helped Pat when Pat did it. So
Okay.
there are other possibilities too if you need help.
Sandra,
Okay.
I'll send you a picture of what I've got set up if that works for you.
Yeah, that's good. You did a good job, and I love the idea of fish sauce, because I'm really a big anchovy advocate
Oh, good. Well, you will like it.
as a base flavor to a lot of recipes. People just kind of think, when, for example, if you have a Caesar salad, I can't stand it when they give you the Caesar salad and just this anchovy sitting on top of it.
Right, no, they gotta be mixed in. And you don't
Yeah.
even know they're there. But you
No.
know when they're missing.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, send me a picture, because I want to just see how to set up for next week.
Sure, love to.
Okay.
I'll do that right now.
So
Okay.
again, Susan, thank you so much. It was
You're
wonderful.
welcome, Gloria. So happy to be a part of it. Thank you for getting us organized.
No problem. We're gonna
Alright.
try to set up a follow-up series. We have 3 more. Sandra, and then 2 that we're sort of evolving. And then we'll go back to the drawing board, but basically not have to, because the response has been so phenomenal. So if you're willing, we'd be happy to have you back again.
I
Susan.
love it.
Love
I
it.
love it. It'd be really fun. And maybe I won't make such a mess next time.
Oh, wonderful. It's,
You did well. You did well.
you did beautifully.
I
Yeah.
kind of like the idea too that it's in various kitchens. So like depending on how someone's kitchen is, we can see like how they go about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No,
I mean,
that-
mine would be a definite experiment because you know I'm in one of the micro apartments. Of the church. Like in my bedroom and my kitchen right now.
Funny.
That is
Well,
Okay, you-
thank you guys. This was a lot
Okay.
of fun.
Take
Have a
care.
good night. Stay safe.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Bill. Thank you
Bill.
for coming.
Hey,